It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Michael O'Neill, founder and chief executive officer of GetWellNetwork. Following surgery and chemotherapy to treat non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Michael emerged humbled, inspired, and ready to finish the graduate studies interrupted unexpectedly by his cancer. Steering the final year of his JD M.B.A. program from business plan to life mission, Michael founded GetWellNetwork to tackle an unaddressed problem in healthcare, educating, engaging, and empowering patients and their families to take control of their healthcare journeys. 2 decades later, GetWellNetwork has given millions of patients around the world a voice in their own care, and by doing so has increased the speed of trust in the healthcare industry. Michael holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Notre Dame and a JD MBA from Georgetown University, and he lives in Chevy Chase, Maryland with his wife and 2 daughters. Michael O'Neill, welcome into the corner office.
Hey, thanks, Brant. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, God, great to have you here. We spoke about a week or so ago, and of course, the subject of the day is what we need to start with. We're recording this in the first week of June, but this probably isn't going to come out till sometime in August, so we'll be a couple of months out. But yeah, just give us a quick update. How are you holding up during these interesting COVIDian times, and importantly, your organization and its clients?
Actually, I stand grateful, intense, focused, and energized. Hey, it's a remarkable time. The COVID-19 crisis, these kind of things kind of bring, I guess, an adrenaline and focus that in some ways we were born for this. We've been doing our work for 20 years and know how to do this work. And so we launched a bunch of great stuff into 200 organizations in 5 weeks and are touching thousands of patients on the COVID side and really think we can really make a difference. So that part's been good.
That's so cool. So you haven't had to lay anyone off. If anything, it sounds like you might have been in a hiring situation with regards to, kind of your activity in the network. Has that been the case?
It's interesting. We've rolled out, over $10 million of free software across the U.S. And at the same time, it's been an incredibly pressure-filled business environment. So we've had to do a little bit of cutting to kind of make sure that we had the wherewithal to kind of stand through all this. But not a lot, and we are now rehiring very quickly.
Well, that's great. Well, Congratulations on that. And we want to get to the GetWellNetwork and what you're doing a little later in the podcast. But we always like to kind of start with the early years. Michael, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
So I grew up in New York in a small town called Newburgh in Poughkeepsie, New York, in the Hudson Valley.
Oh, yeah.
And, really quite simply, just some of the greatest people on earth who taught me everything I know about family, about loyalty, about integrity, and always cherish time to kind of go back. I was the middle of 5 children spread over 7 years. So it was kind of like a pack of wolves, So so 3 kind of pretty simple lessons, kind of team over self. My dad preached 6 hugs a day in our house, which I know sounds over the top, but until COVID was probably practicing that one with a religion that some felt odd, but it was phenomenal. And then really kind of you can do anything you set your mind to. So it was really a pretty remarkable childhood 4 boys and a little girl. All my brothers grew up in one bedroom with 2 bunk beds. It was kind of hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And what did Dad do? What was his work?
So both mom and dad were entrepreneurs. Dad was a management consultant, former dean of students at a college that brought us to Newburgh, and then really taught team building, problem solving, communication skills during the whole total quality management movement of the 80s.
Oh, right. TQM. Sure.
Yeah.
I remember that. Was exposed to that Procter & Gamble years and years ago. And Mom supported him in that, or did she have other entrepreneurs?
No. So Mom actually owned and ran 3 special needs preschools throughout Newburgh and Orange County and Goshen County in Goshen. And so, we spent a lot of time kind of around them, of course, being involved in the business, everything from painting classrooms to mowing lawns to building binders for Dad's workshops. So it was a big part of our youth.
That's great. Terrific. And you were the middle of 5. Any, kind of inspirational folks around you, uncles, aunts, teachers, coaches? What were some of the things that you remember from your youth in that regard?
I have to say, I think my family, because the family was so big, we were kind of the central gathering place for lots of kids and people and coaches in the area. My brothers and sisters are just ballers. They're ballers in life, in school, and in sports. I got the oldest and the youngest were both Division I athletes. The second oldest one was the last one cut on the famous Villanova basketball teams back in the late 80s.
Oh,
I was the worst, athlete, but still played a lot and really just learned really so much from them. They are my best friends, my mentors, and my role models.
That's great. Were you a good student in school?
So I got good grades. And I think there's a distinction between getting good grades and being a good student. So I have a couple of daughters who are teenagers now. My older one is 16. And to watch her go to work with the planning, depth, drafts, output, diligence, she's a good student. I got good grades. But the education needs to change. It's a whole nother podcast, but I think therethere's a whole new way to do education. And it's great to see the young folks digging into it.
Well, we're certainly experiencing a different type of education during, these pandemic times. Are both your kids at home doing online learning now?
They are. They're blessed. They're in a brand new school here in D.C. That's an international school, and so they've got a sister school in Shenzhen, China. So they really were about eight weeks ahead, as you can imagine, on this distance learning. And so it's been a pretty remarkable time to watch them engage differently, and it's been really interesting to kind of be a part of that.
Yeah. You mentioned Mom and Dad were both entrepreneurs. Any specific lessons from them growing up, either in the business world or, as part of kind of your, your growing up credentials, so to speak?
I really think that, what we kind of saw with them is they truly outworked everyone. But at the same time, we were always center, and I actually think that their ability to kind of turn it on so hot when they were working, and then frankly equally hot when they were with us, was a really powerful formula.
That's a hard thing to do.
It is, It is, and it's almost like this notion of, hey, when you get up in the morning, you race as fast as you can to work to have the biggest impact you possibly can, and then you race as fast as you can home to kind of have that incredibly unique time. And my mom and dad taught me that not about balance, it's about embracing the imbalance, and to just get after it because time is just so precious.
Did they balance their energy between both, or did they give an equal amount of that level of energy to both their home life as well as their work?
Well, so my dad's an O'Neill and my mom's an Esposito, so we had this pretty stereotypical. We ran hot, high emotion, a lot of laughs, a lot of tears, but it was just a great. There was never a shortage of energy, and so I don't have a shortage of it either. It's been a real blessing.
Well, with Mom and Dad being an entrepreneur, I'm sure you pursued some entrepreneurial things as a kid. Tell us about those?
It's funny. I surrounded myself early on, like the jobs I would take early on were really with other entrepreneurs. So a guy started a car wash right next door to my high school. And so it allowed me to kind of get in 3 hours of work between the end of the school day and the beginning of basketball practice. Then I grabbed onto a guy during summers who actually was painting houses, hot houses in the summer. It was hot and terrible and dangerous ladder tricks that you and I can laugh about over a cold beer one day. But I kind of just surrounded myself, with entrepreneurs, just because there was something that attracted me to scrap, like figuring out what you are good at and really kind of getting after it every day was something that was just really an attraction, like a magnet.
Was college always a goal for you, or something that mom and dad supported, and did some of that cash get set aside for that, or did you have other vices as a high schooler?
It really did. What ended up happening was our deal was mom and dad will pay for college. We pay for everything that isn't books and sleeping,
Right.
and then we're on a hook for grad school when we want to go. And so, but there really was there was just a real value place. My dad was a PhD in psychology. My mom had a master's, and she would actually end up getting her PhD at 65. So there's a real value placed in education, and it really is something that all of us chased after as an investment ourselves.
And what led you to the University of Notre Dame grade school?
Thank you. Hey, it's one of those places when you grow up in kind of the family environment that I did. There's a certain kind of value set, and not so much religious, but absolutely kind of spiritual, and really kind of racing towards folks that actually feel community, and how important community is in people's lives. So I think that was the biggest draw, aside from the miracle, to kind of get accepted and have an invitation to go be a part of it all.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you studied American government, political and politics, right, if I'm not mistaken, and kind of the choice of going down that road. Tell us a little bit about how you came to that conclusion.
Yeah, I think my dad was an idealist. He would talk all the time, even in his TQM world, about the fact that he was changing the world, and he would ask us all the time, about exploring enough things to kind of find where we're going to kind of put our imprint on the world. And so I guess going to study government, maybe I was trying to figure out on my way out not to have a job. I don't know what the objective was, but it really was, I think, like kind of getting after like how and be taught how to think, how to form arguments, how to see things from all sides, how to take a position, and really like I just love being around people who care. And when you study things like government and liberal arts, it just people really care, and that was a big part of my youth and really has served me well.
Did you consider going into government at some point in time during those 4 years there?
I did. I picked up a minor in peace studies and did kind of a senior thesis on at the time on gang violence in LA and really thought about doing something kind of on the policy side, in and around criminal justice and then just ended up taking a different path. But yeah.
Right. And worked your way during college as well, either while you were going to school or when you came back over the summers?
I did both of them. So at school at Notre Dame, you live in these dorms for a large part of your time there. And so we all of us had little pizza shops down in the basements. So we'd worked there, of course, gave a lot of free pizzas away to our friends, but did that. And of course, in the summers came back and again, did a lot of things that were really just as much physical as anything else, just letting my brain take a little bit of a break, making sure I was learning how to show up for work every day and work hard. And so I was very, very grateful for that.
And it looks like you went into advertising right out of college. Was Deutsch your first job?
So Deutsch was my second job. My first job was a little shop called Griffin Bacall.
Goodness, I know Griffin Bacall.
Is that right?
Yeah, I used to work with them. I was on the brand side with Procter & Gamble early on.
You're kidding.
They specialized in kids advertising.
Yes. So my first account was Play School Toys. I worked I kind of hit the lottery on mentors. I worked for three women, a 3-woman team who was led by Jill Baldoff, and I actually answered their phones and wrote their memos and faxed their 30-page documents. And she literally taught me what it took to actually be a professional. And so, in fact, I saw her last year for the first time in about a decade, and the reunion was so cherished. So yeah, so I started at Griffin Bacall and then moved over and worked for Donnie Deutsch, who was truly the best entrepreneur I've ever been around.
Yeah, fantastic.
Great to learn from him.
Well, I got to know both Tom and Joe Bacall very well.
Sure.
Griffin and Joe Bacall very well. Worked with them. We had a kids product that was in the juice area, and worked with a gentleman by the name of Bob Horn. Was Bob there?
Yes. Yes, he was. That's so funny.
Great folks. Those were some of my first years as a brand manager.
Just such great people, and really kind of actually, like, without me knowing I was learning it, formed a culture that was incredibly success driven, but so based on values, and values of being together and working on behalf of our clients and each other. And they're just terrific.
Yeah, terrific. Well, and not, I guess, too soon after you went to Deutsch, you had some health problems. We talked about that a little bit in the bio. Tell us about when that developed and, kind of how that steered your life from that point forward.
Yeah, so kind of a crazy experience. So I left advertising after 5 or 6 years to go to graduate school down at Georgetown University in D.C. And I went to go study a JD M.B.A. And really the thought was to just go get training so I could come back and either own or run an ad agency. I love the ad business, but I really just needed to learn more. I could read a media plan and a strategy plan, but I really didn't know what a profit and loss statement was, didn't understand financing, and so really wanted to just go get smarter so I could come back and actually lead some things at a bigger level. Anyway, 3 years into my 4-year graduate program, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and those of us who are members of the Cancer Club, it's one of these things that freezes you, in time. And so
24 years old?
I was actually 28. So I was 28 years old, ended up going through surgery to cut about half my stomach out, spent a couple of weeks as an inpatient and then 5 cycles of CHOP chemotherapy through the summer of 1999, and then returned to grad school with a bald head and about 10 pounds lighter and a lot of fire in my belly to make the healthcare experience different.
Oh, that's fantastic. So literally took a break then in between, or did you just literally do that over the summer and didn't miss a beat, came right back and finished your degree?
Yeah, whenever you have cancer, it's so interesting. You find gratitude for little things. So I guess one thing I was grateful for is I got sick in the spring right before finals. So I did chemo through the summer, and I was kind of ready to go as I was coming back in the fall. So anyway, so we try to find little blessings and then just get after it for however much time we have left.
That's terrific. Well, goodness gracious. And I really want to hear more about, obviously, the GetWell Network and your inspiration around it. Did it become an M.B.A. project? Was that kind of part of the founding of the company? Tell us a little bit about how you came across the idea.
It did. And since then, I've been an adjunct professor at Georgetown and speak down at their classes a lot. And I tell them all the time when I talk to Dean Almeida, who's the dean now, the business school, I said, listen, whenever you need something, anytime, anything, you call. And if I'm in town, I'm in. Because my last year in grad school, as I did return, I cannot tell you the flexibility, the encouragement that every single professor gave me to kind of take all my electives and to build this business plan through the lens of a legal planning class, to a finance class, to a research class, to a quantitative statistics class. And so I really took that last year to really build out a business plan that ended up becoming very well thought out because of all their help.
What was the the kind of the inspiration moment? What did you see lacking in the healthcare system, and what was kind of that aha that said, "Wow, this is my mission"?
So this will really sound kind of blunt, but I was laying in a hospital bed at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore for 11 days, and I was staring at this 25-year-old television on the wall. And every morning, this young kid would come in and ask me for $8 to kind of turn the TV on. And as he would turn it on with this metal key, I'd be flipping up around the channels. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I just came from a world where at my fingertips, I have access to all of the information, the people, the data that I need to make very good decisions about really important and complicated things. And now here I am, thrust into the healthcare world as a cancer patient, and I feel like I don't have access to anything. People were busy. The technology, while clearly amazing on the medical side, was non-existent, from a patient standpoint. And I sat there staring at daytime soap operas, and I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? So literally the concept of the GetWell Network literally came from my law school roommate came to visit me. I'll never forget it. And I had drawn on a napkin on my bed tray, hey, I'm actually going to convert this television into a desktop. I'm going to make it into a computer. I'm going to hook it up to my clinical chart so that I actually, as a patient, can follow along with my medications, with my procedures, with the questions I have. And so that really was the genesis, of GetWell Network.
That's awesome. And that was about 20 years ago. And
it
today,
was.
Tell us a little bit about the company. How big are you? And, describe your mission to us.
Yeah. So today the mission's really straightforward. We exist to help when healthcare is front and center in someone's life. And GetWell Network is there to help you take an active role in your health journey. And we fundamentally believe, and now we have measured, that a more active, educated, involved patient is a better patient, and the outcomes get better if we can do that. So today we are touching about 12 million people, patients and families a year with our software. We are working in over 600 organizations across the United States, in the Middle East, Australia, a little bit in Ireland and Canada. And we are working alongside of healthcare providers to help them implement strategies and technologies and change management to really put patients and families in the center of the care process. And we are measuring like crazy the impact that has on service, quality, and cost.
So just really providing them better information so they can track where they are, but also be better educated about the care they're getting. Is that a good summary?
It really is. It's funny when you get thrust into healthcare, oftentimes as a patient, it's a whole new set of acronyms and things you don't understand. You can't even read the bill. And, there's just a lot. It's not very seamless as we like things to be in this day and age. So we're helping to kind of really digitize and take the seams, out of the patient experience.
That's awesome. And how many employees today?
We have about 350 employees.
Wow. And are they all in the Bethesda area, or are you located all over the world?
They're not. Yes, we are. So about 100 of us are in and around Bethesda. And then really 2/3 of the staff are everything from nurses to technologists to, client service folks and what have you, are really kind of all over the place working and walking the halls of our clinics and hospitals every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. So kind of reflecting back to some of those early advertising years, and now, of course, 20 years with GetWell, what would you say are kind of some of the early inspirations or things that you might have learned, in that advertising world that you're now applying today?
I think probably the most important thing that I learned in advertising was focus. We would go through a process to help organizations identify, a brand's essence, right? Both the rational side and the emotional side of the brand. And we would actually have to do the research, both on the consumer side and on the kind of business side, to figure out ultimately, how do you go from actually describing your company in a paragraph to actually articulating this in a phrase, where it really captures, frankly, hearts and minds of the stakeholders that you're actually needing to influence. So I think the fundamental thing I learned, in advertising was that gift to really kind of get underneath, and really understand from a multiple stakeholder standpoint how you can articulate what you're trying to do to kind of then to go change behavior, and that's what we're trying to do in healthcare.
Well, that and it just sounds like, what you've established is really a very, very important communication vehicle to those of us who may or may not, who are unfortunate, of course, to be thrust into a situation and may or may not understand, all of the rules. And as you said, the acronyms, have unfortunately had a couple of hospitalizations, and it does really feel like a different world. You feel like an infant in many ways because you don't understand what's going on. So you've really proven to be a better communicator, right? Is that kind of part of it as well?
It truly is, and that communication, as in healthcare, it's so critical that it is bidirectional. And oftentimes multimodal, like a certain patient may need to really see things on a text message, and others may need you to look them in the eye, and explain it 3 times. And so our ability to understand a person's capacity to engage in their care really helps us then guide the providers on how to intervene with them most effectively. And ultimately, to your point, it's communication. How can we actually just really transform the communication protocols and technologies, in healthcare?
Who were some of the first people you hired when you got going with GetWellNetwork?
It's funny. I when I talk to these classes all the time at Georgetown now and down at UVA at times, I tell them all the time, hey, you probably spend your time in your dorm rooms and out at night with people who are really like you. Those are probably who your friends are. I will tell you, when you start a business, hire people that aren't like you, because there simply aren't enough talent and human resources to get all the work done. And so for me, I purposely, I knew I was a marketing guy. I understood brands. I knew I could actually sell. I had no idea about technology. I had no idea about operations. I had no idea. And so my first 3 hires were literally, we had me on sales. We had an operations guy named Gino, who I knew from growing up. We had a technologist named Jeff and a software engineer named Robin. And those were kind of the four hires, So, it was a blessing to understand how much had to get done and to not have overlapping skill sets because it just is too much to get done.
Right. Now, was that the first time you started managing people, or did you actually have people responsibility back at Deutsche?
Yeah. So when it came to teams, I began to be a manager when I was at Deutsche Advertising, and that part came naturally to me. Growing up, being a part of a big family, always being captains of teams and leaders of kind of school groups and those kind of things. While the mistakes that I've made leading my company are countless, that part thankfully came quite naturally.
I've recently heard it said that some CEOs are uncomfortable, having their answers questioned rather than their questions answered. How do you kind of deal with that when you've got pretty smart people in the room?
I guess this one's pretty easy. We purposely recruit for a couple of key things at the leadership level. And one of them, believe it or not, is ego. So we need strong voice, patient and family engagement work, and technology and software development work. It's the ultimate team sport. And so unless we actually recruit for leaders that around the table, quite honestly, have diverse experience matched with a decent sized ego, we don't get to the right answer, And so our whole thing is really built, on a couple of kind of core kind of culture and kind of value rules that we stand by, and it really kind of works well for us.
That's awesome. Cool. And if you look back at kind of your leadership style over the last 20 years, how would you say it's evolved?
Significantly, to be honest with you. When we first started the company, I would tell you that the way I led and the way the company evolved early on was very personality based, and it was based on my personal experience and, my instincts on the product. And over time, what I realized, and I had a great executive coach about 5 years into building GetWellNetwork, and he really pushed me to really kind of begin to understand, hey, moving from a personality-based to a commitment-based organization will really allow for the scale that you say you actually want to have. And so we really began to talk very openly about who the stakeholders are, what are our commitments, and make sure we filter all of our key decisions through these commitments. And it's really served us quite powerfully. That's great.
That's great. So literally holding that style up against the core values in many ways, right? In terms of how you established how you want to do business.
No doubt. It's funny. We're not there anymore because the offices are all closed. But the values, people ask about culture all the time, and we don't really focus on culture. We focus on, from a leadership standpoint, in my mind, the leadership needs to set and withstand and hold up values, and then let the teammates drive culture, And so for us, there are values. They're painted on our walls, and they're simple, and it's 3 of them. Number 1, root for each other. Number 2, share openly. And number 3, be world class every day. And if we actually uphold these as values and then let the team kind of build culture, it really has served us quite well.
Yeah, terrific. How do you decide if it's time to micromanage someone or stay out of their sandbox?
I'm pretty open about the way that I know works best for me and gets the best outcome and gets best for the company. And that is, I guess, 2 things. 1, I'm kind of involved on the bookends. 1, upstream in vision. So when we're ideating, when we're kind of creating, I often like to be in that mix just to hear what others are actually thinking and saying, kind of what overall direction we're going. And then I love to be really involved at the end and just put a finishing touch that I think might be a real helpful push, at the end, and then really let folks operate with a lot of freedom, in the middle, kind of 80 to 85%. And we usually just plan for 1 touch point, on a midstream, and then we just let them fly. When you have the right people, this is so cliche, but when you let them fly, amazing things happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure you're involved in a lot of interviewing, particularly for your direct reports, and maybe sometimes kind of down the food chain, so to speak. But there's an important hire. Maybe it's someone 2 or 3 levels below you in the organization, and you've been asked to maybe just spend 5 or 10 minutes with them. What do you focus in on when you have that time?
I always ask them just 3 questions, and oftentimes a couple of levels down, as you say, sometimes I only have 15 minutes with them. And so the first is just, what gives you energy and why? I just love to know what drives people. And I don't care if they answer something personally or professionally. I just want to understand where their soul is. The second thing is what depletes your energy and why, because I want to make sure I understand the kind of environment you want to put this person in to make sure that we're doing energy inducing things with them and not energy depleting. And then the third thing really is if you can have an enduring impact on one specific thing in the world, what would that be? Because, I'm learning from my kids, if we can remove some of the barriers and allow them to pursue passions earlier, frankly, in life and even in the workplace, it is like literally mind blowing what the productivity of people, and so that's really what my interest is. I certainly trust, of course, my team and the managers. Hey, do they have the right marketing skills or the right engineering skills? That's stuff that I have 100% confidence our crew's going to figure out. I love to understand what drives people.
Yeah, that's cool. If I was to ask someone that's been with you for a while, maybe not from the beginning, but in the last 5 or 10 years, what's unusual or unique about your culture, what would you think they'd say?
I actually think that they would say that what's unique is that we really kind of practice this notion of the speed of trust. When trust is high, speed is fast and costs are low, quite honestly. And when trust is low, things slow down and costs get high. And so if we stick to these values I mentioned earlier, it really what I'm really trying to do is build an environment of trust, among us all. Because in our world, it's so complicated, it's so competitive. Our customers are under so much stress and pressure business-wise, and our patients are under so much stress from a life standpoint that we need to move really fast to make sure that we're actually providing them with software and services that can support them. And we can only do that if we can really adapt to how rapidly changing this. And frankly, COVID's a great example of this. It's like we're kind of coasting along with like our 2020 roadmap, in our budget, and all of a sudden the world changes. And so the question really is if we didn't have the speed of trust, we could never, literally in 10 days, produce a software package to roll out to 200 organizations in 6 weeks and impact 90,000 people. There's no way. So like that, I think would be the most unusual thing that they would talk about, is how much we rely on that speed of trust.
Yeah. That's awesome. You mentioned COVID, and there's lots of speculation about what the world's going to look like, and specifically work environments in a kind of post-COVID world, and maybe we'll be in and out of it for a while. A lot of speculation about this coming back again in the fall. But if you kind of look in your crystal ball and looked at your industry and your company, what changes do you see ahead?
So I guess I think about this on two levels. I guess on the personal level. I have to admit, I have a sadness to me, and it really pertains to social stuff. I think that, again, look, I grew up in a big family. I've got a group of 25 friends at Notre Dame that we call the family. This is
6 times a day.
Yeah, exactly. So socially, there's a sadness and an anxiety around how do we find our way back towards what I have found to be an incredibly important part of my life and energy source, and that is getting it from others and their connectedness.
The physical intimacy.
Physical, yes, exactly.
Shaking hands, giving a hug.
Playing on teams, exactly. So like that part's a little bit sad, and I have some anxiety about how that kind of fills out. On the business side, I got to tell you, like I'm incredibly energized, and the two things that come to mind are efficiency and technology acceleration. In my business in healthcare, there is every complexity in the world put up to kind of move forward on innovation rapidly. And what COVID has done has stripped all of the BS out of the way and made room for like, hey, how the heck are we going to actually care for these incredibly sick people who are very afraid, and we're afraid to actually touch them? And so it has removed so many barriers so rapidly that it gives me great hope, in our ability to be responsive in the future.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. And I've already seen it happen in my business. I kind of thought I would go into an area where people wouldn't hire. And yet, of course, we're agnostic in terms of our industry. So we're doing food production and healthcare and everything else. But, it's amazing how people now are saying, well, I guess we can let people work from home. It's okay now. There was always this trust level before.
Oh, I know.
And, the level of productivity is already documented well before COVID. And, people can walk 5 minutes to their place of work versus driving 45 minutes. What a difference that's going to make. I feel sorry for the commercial real estate people, though, because they're going to be hit hard. I think it's going to be
look, there's some fundamental shifts that will absolutely, hurt some industries. But listen, I just something you said, it struck me. I think it goes back to this notion of speed of trust. It's like the speed with which our organization was blessed to be able to pivot is really based on the things that you've done culturally and values wise the last 10 years. If you hadn't done them, it just takes longer. So it's a really interesting time for sure.
Yeah. Another thing I've heard is that there'll be companies operating 3 to 5 years from now that will be household names.
Yep.
That we don't even know of yet, maybe not even founded yet. Maybe one of them will be GetWellNetwork, but it's just going to be, we're going to be doing things so much differently moving forward. And, in many ways, that should add to our productivity and our effectiveness, despite, of course, some of the social downsides. But hopefully there'll be ways we can get over that too. We'll see what comes next.
I think that's right. And I got to tell you, I'm sure you're feeling the same thing. Just the unexpected requirement to be still.
Yeah.
I have never felt so focused and productive in my career, since like the early days. And I actually believe it's because of some of this forced stillness. I'm not spending 20 hours a week in racing for a plane and being in a, crowded, airplane. And I got to tell you, the stillness has just really allowed me to focus and be clear, and be more creative, so it's been really, really powerful.
Michael, you've been very generous with your time, but we always have one last question we ask all our CEO guests. And that's kind of what career and life advice would give to someone who maybe has their eyes in the corner office in their employer, or perhaps wants to be an entrepreneur like you and found their own company someday.
Well, so I have to say, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up with a psychologist as a dad who gave lots of advice. So because of that, I don't take advice very well, nor do I give any. However, I'm a huge believer in shared experience. So I would love just to share, what has worked for me. And so I guess it's three things. The first is nothing trumps purpose-driven work. It literally, when you would rather succeed in your work than do anything else, it is a terrific driver of success. So to me, purpose-driven work has really mental, asset that I have leaned on to really drive what I've driven for the last 20 years. The first thing. The second thing is values trump culture. If we actually, but there's no compromise. Like when you are kind of values driven, there's simply no compromise, and that means sometimes when someone violates those values, you actually have to fire them. And that's hard. Second thing, and the third thing is I have learned that when I check my list and my time against making sure I'm equally putting my efforts into corporate development and strategy, client development and customers and culture development and people, when I actually make sure I'm balancing out, that my time in those three areas is when I'm really doing well and we're doing well. And when one of them kind of outstrips the other for a 4-week period, and I don't balance it out, we really kind of suffer from that, So those would just be three things that certainly have worked for me.
Well, that's awesome, Michael. Michael O'Neill, President, Founder, and CEO of GetWellNetwork. Thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Hey, thank you for having me. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.